Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. If you enjoy the content, please help support the channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your support really helps the channel grow and reach more people. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Wars reveal the structure of power. Wars reveal what normal politics hides. They expose the real interests behind governments, institutions, media narratives, and financial systems. They show which powers are truly sovereign and which ones are only instruments of deeper structures. They reveal who benefits from chaos, who profits from dependency, and who is trying to build a different world. The world is now moving through one of those revealing moments. Ukraine, the Middle East, Iran, Russia, China, Europe, energy markets, financial systems, censorship, social unrest, and the collapse of trust in institutions are not isolated events. They are connected through a larger struggle over the future of global power. Russia, China, and Iran are trying to build a new security architecture across Eurasia. That means reducing or removing the power of Western colonialist forces that have long relied on balance of power politics. The old method was simple: pit one nation against another. Keep regions divided. Keep countries weak. Keep them dependent on Western weapons, Western credit, Western markets, and Western approval. The old system did not need direct occupation everywhere. It could work through debt, sanctions, military alliances, intelligence networks, proxy wars, regime change, and financial control. It could present itself as diplomacy, development, aid, investment, security cooperation, or democracy promotion. But the underlying logic remained the same. Political control creates financial control, and financial control creates extraction. The resistance to this system is becoming stronger because the pattern is now more visible. Wars are great revealers because they force hidden structures into the open. The war in Ukraine revealed the depth of the Western confrontation with Russia. The wars in the Middle East revealed how far Western powers are willing to go to preserve regional dominance. The pressure against Iran revealed the strategic importance of removing independent powers from Eurasia. The rise of China revealed the anxiety of a declining system facing a real alternative. The old Eurocentric world order is beginning to give way. For 500 or 600 years, Western powers shaped the global system through conquest, colonialism, finance, maritime control, industrial superiority, and narrative dominance. That era is not ending peacefully or quietly. It is resisting its own decline. It still has enormous power, but it no longer has uncontested legitimacy. The intellectual journey behind this view begins with the realization that much of what people are taught about history, economics, and politics is incomplete or false. Growing up inside a socialist system, seeing Marxism fail to deliver prosperity, traveling to the West, witnessing war in former Yugoslavia, seeing Venezuela collapse through banking crisis, and later watching the global financial crisis of 2008 from inside financial markets all point toward the same conclusion. The official explanations rarely explain the real forces behind events. Yugoslavia was especially revealing. Before the war, almost no one believed such a war was possible. The society was mixed, intertwined, and connected through families, culture, and daily life. Croats, Serbs, Muslims, Slovenians, Montenegrins, and Macedonians lived inside a shared social world. Then war came, and almost overnight nuance disappeared. The entire psychology of society polarized. Once blood was spilled, everything changed. War became the center of identity. Fighting became patriotic duty. Asking careful questions became suspicious. If someone tried to understand both sides, they could be accused of betrayal. War destroyed the space for thought. It forced people into loyalty camps. Only later did it become possible to see that the war was not simply a spontaneous eruption of ancient hatred. It was instigated from outside. It was shaped by forces beyond the peoples of Yugoslavia themselves. That realization opens the deeper question: who benefits from making neighbors kill each other? Who has the incentive to break societies apart? Who gains when regions are weakened, divided, traumatized, and made dependent? The same pattern appears elsewhere. The events of September 11th created the conditions for the global war on terror. The official story did not explain the full agenda that followed. The financial crisis of 2008 revealed another layer. Western economic policy after the crash did not seem designed to fix the real economy. Either the people in charge were completely incompetent, or they were pursuing objectives they never explained to the public. Over time, the same structures become visible across centuries. Power centers migrate, but the logic remains. Ancient Greece, Rome, Venice, Amsterdam, the City of London, Wall Street, Paris, Frankfurt, Tokyo, and other financial centers all form part of a long continuity of organized power. The names change, the costumes change, the institutions change, but the underlying structure of extraction, control, and expansion remains. That structure has now run into serious opposition. Iran, Russia, and China are not small targets. They are sovereign civilizations with resources, industrial capacity, military power, history, and strategic depth. They understand more clearly what they are facing. They understand the playbook. They understand sanctions, proxy wars, color revolutions, debt traps, propaganda, military encirclement, and regime change. This understanding gives them power. Europe is moving toward disintegration because the European Union has become structurally detached from the people it claims to represent. Its power arrangement resembles a system where elected bodies exist, but real decision-making happens elsewhere. The European Parliament debates, but the European Commission drafts and drives much of the agenda. Behind the Commission stand lobbyists and hidden interests whose identities and incentives are not transparent. The result is a collision between the European Union and the people of Europe. Ordinary people do not want war with Russia. They do not want heavy censorship. They do not want dystopian digital controls. They do not want their farms destroyed, their energy security collapsed, their food production weakened, or their living standards sacrificed. They want ordinary things. Safe streets, decent healthcare, good schools, economic opportunity, stable families, affordable energy, and the right to be left alone. Instead, they receive what they did not ask for: war preparation, uncontrolled immigration, censorship, social engineering, economic insecurity, farmers under attack, energy dependence, deindustrialization, loss of competitiveness, more propaganda, less freedom, more surveillance, less accountability. This gap between what people want and what systems impose is becoming impossible to hide. Governments claim to be liberal democracies. They speak of human rights, freedom of speech, peace, and democracy. But in practice they prepare for war, censor dissent, restrict movement, weaken national sovereignty, and push policies that people never voted for. This means incompetence is not enough as an explanation. The repeated pattern points to malice, incentive, and design. The common phrase says never attribute to malice what can be explained by incompetence. But the inverse may be closer to reality. Never attribute to incompetence what can be adequately explained by malice. The system is predatory. It is predatory toward the countries targeted by colonialism, but also toward the people living inside the West. The people of Europe and America are not the beneficiaries of the system in any simple way. They are also being exploited. They are also being lied to. Their lives are also being reorganized around the interests of structures they do not control. The pandemic accelerated the awakening. Many people were completely unprepared for the possibility that the ruling structures of society could lie so openly, coordinate so tightly, and impose such incoherent policies. The gap between official narratives and lived reality became too obvious. People began to realize something was deeply wrong. Trust in media collapsed because the media played one of the most destructive roles. Instead of questioning power, it defended power. Instead of informing the public, it disciplined the public. Instead of exposing contradictions, it suppressed them. This pushed people towards social media, independent platforms, podcasts, Substack, and other sources outside the old information monopoly. The old narrative system is breaking. For most of modern history, people depended on newspapers, radio, and television. That made it easier for oligarchic power to control the story. Now the internet allows thousands of voices to investigate, compare, expose, translate, and challenge official claims. This does not mean every alternative voice is correct, but it does mean monopoly control is gone. That is why the ruling structures are so desperate to control social media. Digital IDs, age restrictions, censorship laws, platform pressure, sanctions, and algorithmic control are all part of the attempt to rebuild narrative power. But the genie is already out of the bottle. Every attempt to control information produces more suspicion. The coming clash inside the West appears unavoidable. Even within ruling circles there is growing talk about civil war. Social unrest is spreading. The authorities are not responding by listening to popular grievances. They are responding with repression, censorship, restrictions, and deeper control. Central bank digital currencies would make this much worse. Once money becomes fully programmable and cash disappears, dissent can be punished instantly. Sanctions already show how this works. A person can be cut off from bank accounts, bills, food, income, and the ability to support a family. Spouses and relatives can also be punished. This becomes a socio-economic death sentence. With central bank digital currencies, this power would become even easier to use. A person could be excluded from the economy not through public trial, but through administrative action. Financial control becomes political control. Political control becomes social control. But systems that become too restrictive create their own opposition. When governments force people into impossible arrangements, people opt out. Gray markets and black markets emerge. If a large enough part of society begins transacting outside official channels, the state loses control. Black markets attract both consumers and entrepreneurs because they avoid taxes, regulations, restrictions, and surveillance. When too many people enter them, they cannot easily be crushed. Countries such as Argentina and Venezuela show how large informal economies can become when official systems fail. When people cannot function inside the formal economy, they create another one. Currency can become anything useful. Silver, gold, cigarettes, fuel, food, or other goods can become means of exchange. Once trust in the official system breaks, society begins to improvise. The Ukraine war is likely to end as a hot war sooner rather than later, but the conflict with Russia will not end. The forces targeting Russia have been doing so for centuries. They will not simply accept defeat and stop. The hostility toward Russia has deep continuity. Napoleon's invasion of Russia was not just a French invasion. It involved much of Europe. Operation Barbarossa was led by Nazi Germany, but again much of Europe participated directly or indirectly. These invasions required enormous organization, financing, recruitment, propaganda, and incentive. They show that the drive against Russia has never been only about one leader or one moment. Russia is the greatest prize because of its resources. Its natural wealth is enormous. In a financial system based on collateral and credit, such resources can be turned into financial power. If Western powers gained political control of Russia, its resources could become collateral for loans, investments, and financial flows. Loans become assets for banks. Debt becomes wealth for the lender. The extraction of Russian resources would create a massive credit impulse for Western financial centers. This is the logic of colonialism. Political control allows financial control. Financial control creates debt. Debt creates extraction. Extraction transfers wealth from the colonized region to the money centers. That money can then fund more armies, more mercenaries, more operations, and more expansion. The Middle East follows the same logic. Balance of power politics is not the final goal. It is a tool. The point of balance of power is to prevent any independent regional power from becoming strong enough to say no. Iran is now a regional power with serious military and strategic leverage. Therefore, the old system wants to weaken it, cut it down, or change its regime. Regime change is not only political. It creates the conditions for financial capture. Once political control is achieved, foreign investment enters. Western institutions and firms can buy controlling shares, load companies with debt, and create financial flows from the targeted country to Western banks. Even profitable companies with low debt can be turned into debt vehicles. Their future earnings become payments to foreign creditors. This is conquest through debt. Colonialism has always worked this way. Infrastructure built by colonial powers was usually not built to develop the colonized society. It was built to extract resources. Railways connected mines, plantations, ports, and export routes. They were not built like modern Chinese infrastructure designed to move millions of people and connect a national economy. They were built for extraction. The oil crisis in the Middle East could become a global economic shock. If the conflict escalates, disruption could move from around 10% of global oil supply to much higher levels. Iran has made clear that if its energy infrastructure is destroyed, energy infrastructure across the region can also be targeted. That would affect not only oil, but also gas, fertilizer, chemicals, and supply chains across the world. The global south is especially exposed. Southeast Asia, for example, depends heavily on oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Strategic reserves are limited in many countries. China and Japan may have greater reserves, but many nations cannot absorb a long disruption. The architecture of energy supply cannot be changed quickly. Different crude types, refining systems, storage capacities, and shipping routes take time to reorganize. This is why the Middle East conflict is not regional. It touches the whole world economy. There is also an eschatological layer inside some Israeli political and religious currents. In this worldview, certain factions appear to believe in a redemptive scenario where escalating hostility, regional war, and global opposition lead toward a final transformation. The idea is that Israel's suffering and confrontation with the world becomes part of a path toward redemption and the arrival of the Messiah. This belief system can make policy dangerously irrational because conflict is no longer judged only by practical outcomes. Escalation can be interpreted as part of a sacred sequence. The more the world turns against Israel, the closer the redemptive scenario appears. At that point, actions that seem self-destructive in ordinary strategic terms can make sense inside an apocalyptic worldview. The danger is that such ideas may overlap with real political and military power. If factions inside Israel and their allies inside the United States push for deeper military integration, they may try to use American power as an instrument of their regional and eschatological goals. The risk is not only that the United States supports Israel, the risk is that American military capacity becomes subordinated to another strategic agenda. Even if Trump finds an off-ramp from direct war with Iran, the larger hostility will continue. This is not only Trump's war. It is part of a policy continuity that goes back decades. The agenda to take down Iran has existed since at least the early years after September 11. Iran was expected to fall long ago. It did not. The plan was delayed, but not abandoned. The same applies to Russia and China. The forces that want to break Russia will not stop. The forces that want to contain or defeat China will not stop. A temporary pause may come. A Cold War may replace a hot war. Escalation may be delayed by 5, 10, or 20 years. But the underlying conflict remains until one side is defeated or the global structure changes completely. China understands this. Its leadership knows that a declining power often tries to bring down a rising power. The question of whether the Thucydides trap can be avoided is not academic. It is the central strategic question of the age. The answer may be that the trap cannot be avoided under the old system because the old system cannot tolerate a sovereign peer competitor. Russia, China, and Iran may therefore move deliberately to weaken the Western Empire. They know the strategy, the tactics, and the weak points of the system. They have the resources, geography, industrial capacity, and strategic patience to resist. If they succeed, the world may move from a Western-centered order into a multipolar order. A multipolar order could make a long period of peace possible because so many modern wars have been instigated by the Western colonialist system. Since the Second World War, the United States has played a role in an enormous number of conflicts. Once that system weakens or collapses, the machinery of constant war may weaken with it. But peace will still need to be defended. Oligarchic structures can emerge in any society. Colonial impulses are not limited to one people or one flag. Any system where private wealth rises above political sovereignty can become predatory. This is the difference between certain autocratic systems and modern democracies. In Russia, China, and Iran, political power stands above oligarchic power. The oligarchs may be wealthy, but they are subordinated to the sovereign political structure. If their behavior becomes abusive, the state can cut them down to size. Russia in the 1990s shows the danger when this is reversed. After the Soviet collapse, power shifted from the Communist Party to oligarchs who acted as trustees for Western financial interests. Russia's wealth was looted. Law and order collapsed. The military weakened. Regions stopped paying taxes. Separatism grew. The country was moving toward disintegration. When Vladimir Putin came to power, he reversed that process by forcing oligarchs out of politics. They could keep their businesses, but they had to pay taxes, treat workers properly, and stop trying to control the state. Some challenged him and lost. This marked the turning point. Russia moved from collapse toward sovereignty. In Western democracies, the relationship is inverted. Elected leaders appear to rule, but oligarchic and financial structures stand above them. Leaders implement policies handed down by banks, lobbies, institutions, and hidden power centers. Liz Truss revealed this when she said that as British Prime Minister she discovered that real power rested with the Bank of England and the financial establishment, not with the elected leader. This is participative inequality. Democratic institutions exist, but they end up helping oligarchic power thrive. People vote, debate, and participate, but real policy remains controlled by financial structures. Democracy becomes a mechanism for distributing blame, not power. Despite all this, there is reason for optimism. A political awakening is happening across the world. The internet and social media have changed history. People can now access information from countless sources. They can compare narratives, hear independent voices, follow experts outside official institutions, and see contradictions in real time. The old monopoly over truth is broken. The media cannot gaslight people as easily as before. Official pandemic scares no longer gain the same traction. Attempts to restart fear through monkeypox, disease X, bird flu, Ebola, or other health narratives have struggled because people are more suspicious. The public is no longer as easy to stampede. Thousands of independent voices are now sharing detailed knowledge about finance, war, medicine, history, geopolitics, technology, and power. The more people understand, the harder it becomes to control them through slogans. This is why censorship is increasing. The ruling structures can feel that the narrative system is failing. The next great reform must be the money system. People are beginning to understand that financial architecture is central to exploitation, war, debt, and colonialism. Bitcoin may be a solution or it may be a trap. That remains uncertain. But blockchain as a technology may prove useful because it points toward ways of reorganizing trust, value, and exchange outside old financial monopolies. The task is to redesign the operating system of society. Humanity must de-incentivize colonialism, exploitation, war, and conflict. This requires understanding who the real enemy is, how the system works, and what kind of structures can replace it. The collapse of the old order is loud, violent, and frightening. Wars, political crises, economic shocks, censorship, and social breakdown dominate attention. But something else is happening quietly. Seeds are growing. When a large tree falls, it falls with noise and destruction. Seeds grow in silence. The old structures of governance are collapsing loudly. They hypnotize people through fear. They demand attention through war and crisis. But beneath that noise, new ideas, new networks, new forms of understanding, and new possibilities are growing. Those seeds are the people waking up. The task now is to sharpen the mind, open the eyes, and do whatever is possible to move humanity toward emancipation. The alternative is final enslavement. The future will be decided by whether people understand the system before the system completes its prison.